The night was colder than usual. The wind outside the giant mansion cried like a lonely animal, pushing against the tall glass walls as if warning everyone inside that something terrible was coming. The lights inside the mansion flickered even though the electricity was perfectly stable, as if the house itself could sense the rising storm. In the middle of the huge marble foyer stood Alan Drake, the billionaire whose name alone could make business empires shake. He had the kind of presence that filled a room, sharp suit, strong build, and eyes that had once been full of life, but were now heavy with stress, exhaustion, and an anger he barely controlled anymore. Standing opposite him was Maria Alvarez, the housemaid. Her uniform was a little messy from a long day of caring for the Drake children. She looked tired, her hair stuck to her forehead, her hands wrinkled from washing and cleaning. But her eyes, soft and worried, were fixed on Alan with a mixture of fear and heartbreak. Alan was furious, though neither of them could completely explain why. The day had been frustrating for him, the kind that made every small thing feel like fire on bare skin. And now, after a misunderstanding he didn't even fully understand himself, he snapped. His voice echoed loudly through the mansion. "Alan, Maria, I want you out, right now." Maria froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart dropped so fast she could almost hear it hit the floor. She clutched the straps of her worn-out handbag. "Maria, softly, sir, I don't understand. Did I do something wrong?" Alan did not want to look her in the eye. Something in him, grief, fear, pride, was twisting his emotions into something ugly. "Alan, harsh. I said get out tonight." The silence that followed was louder than his shouting. Maria's lips trembled. She had been with the Drake family for nearly a year. She had cleaned every corner of this mansion, cooked for the children, helped them with homework, comforted them during nightmares, and held their hands when they cried for their late mother. She wasn't just a maid. She was the only warmth left in this house. But Alan, drowning in his own pain, didn't see that right now. Maria swallowed hard. "Maria, but sir, the children they need." "Alan, my children are none of your concern. Leave before I call security." Those words were knives, sharp, unfair, cruel. Maria looked at him for a long moment, not with anger but with sorrow. She wanted to say so much. "They cry for you. They're lonely. They need someone. You're pushing everyone away." But she said nothing. She simply nodded, blinking back tears. She walked toward the door, the sound of her shoes on marble echoing like heavy beats in the air. She stepped out into the cold night, hugging her thin sweater tightly around her body. The wind stung her cheeks as she walked down the long driveway. The mansion lights grew smaller behind her. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't stop walking. Her heart felt heavy, not only because she had lost her job, but because she had lost the little family she thought she had found. She had grown attached to Ethan and Lily, the billionaire's young children. They reminded her so much of her own son, whom she had lost years ago. Every step away from the mansion felt like losing a piece of herself. As she reached the iron gate, she turned back one last time. The mansion stood there, dark and lonely, glowing from the inside but cold at its core. Then, a sound pierced the night. A scream. A child's scream. High, sharp, and terrified. Maria froze. Her eyes widened. Her breath stopped. It sounded like Lily. She took a step closer. Another scream, even louder, followed. This time it was Ethan. Maria's heart hammered like a drum. She didn't think, she didn't question, she didn't hesitate. Her bag fell onto the ground as she turned around and ran, faster than she had run in years, back toward the mansion she had just been thrown out of. She didn't care if Alan yelled again. She didn't care if security dragged her away. She didn't care if she was trespassing. All she cared about was one thing. The children were in danger. As she reached the front door, she found it slightly open, blowing back and forth in the storm as if someone had rushed in or out. The lights flickered again. Maria stepped inside just as thunder cracked across the sky. Her voice trembled as she called out, "Maria, Ethan, Lily, where are you?" But the house answered only with silence. And inside Maria's chest, a deep, terrifying truth began to grow. Something was very, very wrong. The night Alan fired her was the same night his children desperately needed saving. And Maria was the only one who heard their cries. Alan Drake, the billionaire with a shattered heart. Alan Drake was the kind of man newspapers like to write about: billionaire, CEO, award-winning entrepreneur. He had the world at his feet, or so it seemed. But behind the polished suits and confident walk was a man filled with pain so deep it controlled everything he did. 3 years earlier, he lost his wife Lena in a tragic car accident. She had been the center of his world, bright, loving, gentle. They had built a beautiful life together. A big home, 2 adorable children, dreams that stretched far into the future. But the accident didn't just take her life. It took a part of him too. After Lena's death, Alan changed. His laughter disappeared. His patience faded. His warmth turned to cold stone. Every day he drowned himself in work, trying to escape the memories. Every night he lay awake, unable to forget. His children, Ethan and Lily, tried to pull him close, but grief made him blind. He didn't know how to be a father without Lena beside him. He loved them deeply, but his guilt and sadness built a wall between them. And sometimes, when stress and loneliness grew too heavy, he broke like he did tonight. He didn't hate Maria. He didn't even mean the things he said. He was just a man who had forgotten how to feel anything except pain. Maria Alvarez, the maid who loved like a mother. Maria was 42, with a life marked by both struggle and love. She came from a small town where she raised her own son alone. He had been her entire world, bright-eyed, curious, always smiling. But sickness took him away before she could save him. That day broke something inside her. For months she couldn't sleep. She couldn't smile. She couldn't breathe without feeling the ache inside her chest. But slowly she learned to stand again. She found work as a maid to support herself, and though the jobs were hard, they kept her moving. When she came to the Drake mansion, she saw immediately what Alan could not. Ethan and Lily were lonely. Not because they lacked toys or luxury, but because they lacked warmth. Maria became that warmth. She read them stories, braided Lily's hair, helped Ethan with his drawings, sang lullabies when nightmares woke them up. She wasn't just a maid. She became their comfort, the one steady light in their dark house. And in return, they filled a hole in her heart she thought would never heal. She saw herself in their sadness. She saw her son in their eyes. So losing her job tonight broke her in ways Alan couldn't imagine. But hearing their screams, that awakened something fierce in her, a mother's instinct stronger than fear, pride, or rules. Ethan and Lily, the children caught between love and loss. Ethan, 7 years old, was quiet and thoughtful. He drew pictures of his mother almost every day. He tried to be strong for Lily, pretending he didn't miss her, but his drawings told the truth. Lily, only 5, still slept with the stuffed rabbit her mother gave her. She often asked Maria if angels could visit from the sky. She didn't understand why her father was always distant, always busy, always sad. To them, Maria was the maid. She was safety. She was kindness. She was the closest thing to a mother they had left. The house, a mansion without a heart. The Drake mansion was huge, chandeliers, marble floors, golden frames, long hallways, expensive everything. But it always felt cold, too quiet, too empty, as if it was waiting for someone to bring life back into it. Maria brought that life. And tonight when she left, the house returned to its hollow silence. Ethan and Lily felt it instantly. That's why their screams weren't just fear. They were calling for the one person who always came when they were scared. Maria. Maria stood just inside the mansion door, breathing heavily. The front entrance creaked behind her as the storm outside grew louder, almost angry. The house felt darker than usual, not just because of the weather, but because something dangerous was moving inside its walls. The corridor lights flickered again and a cold shiver ran through Maria's spine. She had worked in this house long enough to know its sounds, its smells, its rhythm. But tonight, everything felt wrong. Too quiet, too heavy, too tense. She called again, voice shaking. Maria, Ethan, Lily, where are you? No answer. The silence made her heart pound harder. She moved quickly up the stairs. Her footsteps were loud in the empty mansion, echoing off the walls like warnings. Every step made her more anxious. She could feel fear rising inside her, but she pushed it down. The children needed her. Meanwhile, upstairs in his study, Alan sat heavily in his leather chair, his mind spinning after firing Maria. The guilt pressed against his chest. He kept replaying the moment over and over. Why did I say that? Why did I snap? He ran a hand over his face. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to call her back, but pride held him still. That's when he heard it. A loud crash from the children's side of the house. Alan froze. His heart jumped. He rushed out from his study and sprinted through the hallway. Alan, Ethan, Lily. His voice came out louder than he expected, filled with sudden panic. He didn't care about pride anymore. He only cared that something was wrong. At that same moment, Maria turned the corner into the children's hallway. The lights above flickered. A cold breeze swept through. Maria and Alan almost collided. Alan stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. Alan shocked. Maria, you came back. Maria breathless. I heard the children scream. Something is wrong. Alan didn't argue. Not tonight. Not with fear clawing at his chest. Another cry echoed from behind the children's bedroom door. A small, terrified sound. Without thinking, Alan and Maria rushed to the door together. He pushed it open, and the scene inside made him stop breathing. Lily was lying on the bed, shaking, her little face bright red and wet with tears. Her small hands clutched at her throat as she struggled to breathe. Ethan was curled in the far corner of the room, hugging his knees, eyes wide with terror. The window was wide open. The curtains whipped in the stormy wind. Rainwater had spilled in, soaking the floor. Alan's voice cracked as he rushed to Lily. Alan, Lily, baby, what's happening? But Lily could barely speak. Her breath was shallow, fast, and painful. Maria hurried to her side and touched her forehead. It burned like fire. Her eyes widened. Maria, she has a very high fever. Ethan pointed to the window, crying so hard he could barely talk. Ethan, someone was here. I saw a man. He came in through the window. Alan's blood ran cold. Alan, a man, what did you see? Ethan, he had something shining, something like Mommy's necklace. Alan's heart dropped. That necklace had been stolen during the accident years ago. Someone was targeting them again. Maria gently held Lily's hand. Maria, listen to me. Lily needs help quickly. Her breathing sounds blocked. Alan's hands shook. He was a billionaire, a powerful man, yet at this moment he felt helpless, scared, lost. Alan, what do I do? Tell me what to do. Maria took a deep breath, steadying herself. Maria, we must bring her fever down. Now warm water, salt, a towel. Alan, where is? Maria, I know, stay with her. She ran from the room, racing down the hall, while Alan struggled to comfort Lily, whispering softly. Alan, Daddy's here. Don't worry, we'll help you. His voice trembled. Tears he had held back for years now threatened to fall. Maria returned moments later with everything she needed. She worked quickly, her hands moving with experience and love. She dipped a towel into the warm water mixture and placed it on Lily's throat and chest, helping open her airway. Slowly, Lily's breathing softened. Her tiny gasp steadied. Her tears slowed. Ethan crawled beside her and held her hand tightly. Maria stroked Lily's hair gently. "Maria, you're okay, sweetheart, you're safe now." Alan watched Maria with a mixture of awe, shame, and gratitude. This woman, the one he fired tonight, had rushed back into danger to save his children. And in that moment, Alan felt the conflict he had been fighting for years. His grief, his anger, his loneliness, versus the truth that he had pushed away the one person who brought life into this home. This night was not over. Someone dangerous was inside the mansion. Lily was recovering, but not safe. Everything that had been broken in this family was now being forced into the light. The real conflict wasn't just about an intruder. It was about Alan's own brokenness, and whether he could protect the people he loved before it was too late. Danger in the dark. The storm outside grew stronger, roaring against the windows and making the entire mansion tremble. Alan, Maria, Ethan, and Lily were trapped inside a house full of fear and shadows that moved where they shouldn't. Maria kept her hand on Lily's back, her voice soft as she hummed a lullaby to keep the little girl calm. Ethan sat beside them, holding his sister's hand tightly, as if letting go would make her disappear. Alan stood near the doorway, breathing hard, trying to appear strong, but his hands shook. He kept glancing toward the window, the one that had been forced open. Muddy footprints were visible on the floor. Footprints that did not belong to anyone in the house. Thunder flashed, lighting up the entire room for a moment, and in that single second, Alan saw something that made his heart stutter. A shadow moved at the end of the hallway. He blinked. The shadow vanished. Alan's chest tightened. "Alan, Maria, take the children. Someone is still inside." Maria looked up, her eyes widening not with fear but with determination. "Maria, where do you want us to go?" "Alan, my study. It has a lock and panic button." "Maria, good, take them there now." Maria carefully gathered Lily into her arms. The little girl whimpered, but Maria held her close, whispering comforting words into her ear. Ethan followed, clutching Maria's sleeve. As they stepped into the hallway, the mansion suddenly felt enormous. Endless corridors, long shadows, and echoes that didn't sound like their own. They moved in silence. Every step felt louder than thunder. Halfway to the study, a loud crash echoed downstairs. Alan and Maria stopped in their tracks. Alan's jaw tightened. "Alan, he's still here." Maria placed Lily into Alan's arms and stepped forward. "Maria, take the children, lock the door. I'll distract whoever is down there." Alan grabbed her arm, eyes wide with fear. "Alan, no, Maria, you can't. He could be dangerous." Maria stared back with fierce courage. "Maria, I've faced dangerous before, but the children need you more than they need me right now. Go." Ethan tugged on Alan's sleeve. "Ethan, Daddy, please listen to her." Alan swallowed hard, then nodded. With Lily in his arms and Ethan beside him, Alan rushed to the study. The moment they entered, he locked the heavy door behind them and pressed the panic button that alerted security and police. Inside the study, Alan sat on the floor, holding Lily tightly, breathing shakily. Ethan whispered, "Ethan, will Maria be okay?" Alan closed his eyes. "Alan, she's brave, braver than I've been. She'll come back." Downstairs, Maria faces the dark. Maria moved down the staircase as quietly as she could, her heart pounding like a drum she could not silence. The lights flickered again, plunging the house into deep shadow before buzzing back on. She reached the bottom and stepped into the large living area. Rainwater had blown in through another window. Furniture was knocked over. A drawer was left half open. Then she heard it. A faint sound. A shuffle. A breath. Someone was behind the kitchen island. Maria grabbed the nearest object, a heavy metal candle stand. She held it tight. "Maria, I know you're here. Stop hiding." A man stood slowly, wearing a dark hood and gloves. His face was half covered. In his hand he held a crowbar. He stepped toward her. "Intruder, should have stayed gone, lady." Maria's grip tightened, but she didn't step back. "Maria, you won't touch those children again." He lunged at her. Maria swung the candle stand with all her strength. It hit his arm. He growled in pain. He swung the crowbar back. She dodged. The weapon hit the wall, cracking it. She stumbled but kept fighting, using every bit of strength she had. The intruder grabbed her wrist. She twisted free and slammed her knee into his stomach. He staggered back. Just then, sirens blared outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The intruder panicked and ran toward the back door. Maria chased him to the threshold, but he slipped out into the darkness of the storm. Night slowly faded into a pale gray dawn, the kind that feels heavy with secrets. The mansion, usually glowing with warm golden lights and humming with soft music, now felt cold, silent, and strangely tense. It was the kind of quiet that sits in the corners of rooms, holding its breath. Maria stood outside the gates, hugging her thin sweater around her body as the morning air bit at her skin. She had no home to return to, no savings to keep her warm, but her heart stayed behind those gates. Every beat whispered the same fear. "I hope the children are okay." She looked down the long street, trying to convince herself to walk away, but something inside her refused. It wasn't logic. It wasn't duty. It was something deeper, the kind of instinct that lives inside someone who has lost too much to lose again. She turned back toward the mansion. At the same moment, inside the master bedroom, Alexander Knight, the billionaire everyone feared, the man whose voice could freeze a room, was packing like a restless storm. His phone was pressed to his ear, his eyes sharp with anger and confusion. "What do you mean she never showed up with the reports? Those files were everything. Her mistake could destroy the entire project," he shouted. His assistant replied timidly, "Sir, Maria didn't handle the reports. It was someone else." But Alexander didn't hear the rest. Memories of the night before flashed in front of him, Maria standing small and wounded in his vast office, her eyes red but proud, her voice trembling as she tried to explain. He hadn't let her speak. He had fired her with a cruelty he didn't even understand himself. His chest tightened with something uncomfortable shame. But there was no time. He had promised his children a morning together. It was their first time trying to rebuild what his long work hours had broken. He headed toward the twins' room. "Emma, Liam," he called softly, trying not to sound as harsh as he usually did. "Silence." He pushed open the door and froze. The room was oddly warm, too warm. The windows were shut, the curtains pulled tight. The night lights flickered weakly and the air felt thick, wrong. Emma was curled on her bed, trembling under her blankets, her tiny hands gripping the sheets. Liam was lying still on his pillow, his cheeks flushed an alarming shade of red. His breathing was shallow, rapid, uneven. Alexander felt the world tip under his feet. "Emma," he whispered, shaking her gently. She opened her eyes halfway, confused, dazed. "Daddy, it's hot, my head hurts." Then a soft wheezing sound came from Liam, a sound that didn't belong in any child's body. Alexander's voice broke for the first time in years. "No, no, no, no." He touched Liam's forehead. It was burning. His skin was damp with sweat. His breathing grew tighter, faster, almost desperate. Alexander grabbed his phone with shaking hands. But before he could press the call button, another sound echoed faintly from outside: hurried footsteps, rushed breathing, the metallic clank of the gate opening. "Maria!" She ran into the hallway the second the door swung open, gasping for air from her sprint, her hair messy, her clothes still damp from the cold night. "Mr. Knight," she cried, not waiting for permission. "The children, where are they?" Alexander stared at her, shocked, speechless. How did you know?" he stammered. "I felt something was wrong," she answered breathlessly. "I couldn't leave them." Her eyes darted behind him, then widened in horror. She pushed past him. The billionaire who commanded entire industries, who had never in his life been ignored, simply followed her, helpless, afraid, desperate. Maria knelt beside the twins, her hands moving quickly, checking their pulse, their breathing, their skin. "The heater," she whispered. "It's broken. It overheated the room, they're dehydrated, and Liam is having trouble breathing." "What do we do?" Alexander's voice cracked. Maria looked up, her eyes steady, strong, and full of something he didn't have: courage. "You get cold water. Now towels, open the windows, I'll take care of them." He didn't argue. For the first time in his life, Alexander Knight listened to someone. And that was the moment everything began to change. The next minutes unfolded like a race against death. Cold air rushed into the children's room as the windows were thrown open. The heavy, suffocating heat escaped, replaced by the sharp morning breeze. Maria wrapped Emma in a cool towel, whispering soothing words, while Alexander clumsily spilled cold water on himself in his frantic attempt to bring it to her. "Wring it out gently," Maria instructed. Her voice remained calm even though her hands trembled slightly. It wasn't fear. It was the overwhelming love she had for those children, love that refused to let anything happen to them. She moved to Liam next. His breathing was worse. Each breath sounded like it was being dragged out of him, shallow and painful. His lips were turning pale, his chest rising faster as his small body fought for air. Maria placed her hand over his heart. "Stay with me, sweetheart, stay with me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Alexander watched her, frozen with terror. His son's fragile breaths echoed in the room like countdowns. "What's happening to him?" he choked out. "He's overheating and his airway is tightening," Maria whispered. "He needs help now. Call emergency, don't wait." Alexander grabbed his phone and dialed, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold it. "Please," he said into the phone, his voice trembling in a way no one had ever heard. "My children, they can't breathe, please hurry." Maria lifted Liam into her arms, cradling him gently, rocking him slightly the way only someone who truly knew the child would. "It's okay, breathe with me," she whispered softly near his ear. But Liam's body suddenly jerked once, twice, then stiffened. "Maria," Alexander's voice cracked in terror. Maria felt it. His breath was fatting. She pressed him against her chest and began rhythmically patting his back, her voice tight but steady. "Come on, baby. Come on, don't do this, breathe." Emma, weak but conscious now, began crying softly. "Mommy, Maria, help Liam." Her tiny voice stabbed Alexander's heart. He had pushed Maria away, and now she was the only thing holding his world together. Then it happened. A sudden, sharp cough burst out of Liam. A thin stream of saliva dripped from his mouth, and he gasped sharply, pulling in a painful but real breath. Maria's eyes filled with tears of relief. That's it, sweetheart, breathe." Alexander let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he was holding. His knees buckled slightly as the weight of fear crashed down on him. The paramedics finally burst into the room. But what they saw made them slow down. Maria, exhausted, trembling, hair messy, tears still wet on her cheeks, holding the lifeless then breathing child in her arms like a guardian angel who had refused to let death touch him. "Sir, she saved them," one paramedic said quietly after examining the twins. Alexander's eyes slowly lifted to Maria. For the first time since she had worked for him, he truly saw her. Not as a maid. not as an employee, but as the woman who had stayed, even after he pushed her away. The woman who walked back into the mansion because her heart told her something was wrong. The woman who saved his family. Maria gently handed Liam to the paramedic, and her hands fell to her lap, exhausted. She wasn't thinking about being fired. She wasn't thinking about being homeless. She wasn't thinking about herself at all. She looked at the children, that was all that mattered. But Alexander stepped forward slowly. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "Maria." She looked up. And in that fragile moment, filled with sirens, cold morning air, and the lingering fear of almost losing everything, Alexander Knight, the billionaire known for never apologizing, whispered the last words she ever expected to hear. "Thank you for saving my children. And I am so sorry." She leaned against the doorframe, chest heaving, arms trembling, the candle stand falling from her hands. But she had done it. She had protected the children. Even if no one else in the world ever thanked her, she knew what mattered. The ambulance's flashing lights faded down the long private driveway, leaving behind the cold morning air and a heavy silence that wrapped around the mansion like a blanket of guilt and relief. Alexander stood by the door long after the vehicle disappeared, as if watching it leave helped him breathe again. Maria stood nearby, unsure if she should stay or go. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair messy, and her face pale from exhaustion. But her eyes still held the softness of someone who had poured every drop of love she had into saving those children. For the first time, Alexander turned to look at her fully, not with the distant eyes of a billionaire used to control, but with the humbled eyes of a father who had almost lost his world. "You stayed," he said finally, his voice low, unsteady. Maria nodded. "They needed someone." "Maria," he whispered, "I treated you unfairly. I blamed you for something you didn't do, and I fired you without listening." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. Maria lowered her gaze. "It's okay, sir." He took a step closer. "No, it's not okay. What I did was cruel." Those words hung between them like a weight. Alexander had never admitted guilt to anyone, not his board members, his business partners, or even his own family. But now, standing before the woman who saved his children, he felt smaller than ever. Maria blinked slowly, not knowing what to say. She didn't want his apology to turn into another emotional burden, so she simply whispered, "I'm just glad they're safe." Alexander ran a shaking hand over his face, finally letting the built-up panic drain out of him. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come back." Maria swallowed hard. "I couldn't leave. Something didn't feel right." "And I ignored that feeling," Alexander admitted. "I ignored you." Before she could reply, soft footsteps echoed from the hallway. Emma, still pale but awake, wrapped in a small hospital blanket the paramedics had left. She walked slowly, her tiny feet dragging against the polished marble floor. "Maria," she whispered, her voice small. Maria dropped to her knees instantly and opened her arms. Emma rushed into them, hugging her tightly, the kind of hug only a child who trusts with her whole heart can give. "I'm okay because of you," Emma whispered. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she stroked Emma's hair. "I'm so happy you're safe, sweetheart." Alexander watched the scene with a heavy heart. The bond between his children and Maria was stronger than anything he had witnessed in his own home. Then softly, Emma lifted her head and looked at her father. "Daddy, don't make Maria leave," she whispered. Those words cut through the air with a truth so innocent. It felt like a plea from the deepest place in a child's heart. Alexander felt the guilt stab him once again. "I won't," he said gently. "I promise." Maria looked up in surprise. "Sir." "You are not fired," he said, kneeling down beside them. "And you will never be treated that way again. Not in my home, not in my life." Maria's lips trembled, but she held back her tears. "Thank you, but I wasn't worried about my job. I was worried about them." He nodded. "I know that now." A moment passed, filled with nothing but the soft breathing of Emma still wrapped around Maria's neck. Finally, Alexander stood up and offered his hand to Maria, not as an employer, but as someone trying to make things right. "Come," he said gently, "get some rest, you've been up all night." She hesitated, unsure if she deserved kindness from a man who had thrown her out just hours before. But he waited patiently, his hand still extended. Slowly, carefully, Maria placed her hand into his. He helped her stand, supporting her when her legs wobbled with exhaustion. Emma held her other hand tightly, refusing to let go. Together, the three walked back inside. The mansion, which had felt cold and lifeless just hours ago, now felt warmer, as if the walls themselves sensed that something broken was finally beginning to heal. Behind them, the early sunlight spilled into the hallway, washing the floors in soft gold. And for the first time in a long time, the Knight household didn't feel like a castle made of glass. It felt like a home trying to rebuild itself, piece by fragile piece. The sun climbed slowly, painting the mansion in shades of gold and soft orange. Morning birds chirped on the balcony railing, a gentle melody that broke the tension lingering in the air. Maria sat on the sofa in the living room, wrapped in a blanket Alexander had placed around her shoulders. Her eyes were heavy, but she refused to sleep until she heard news from the hospital. Alexander stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the garden with a face carved by guilt and worry. The strong, unbreakable billionaire now looked fragile human. He turned to Maria suddenly. "They'll call soon. The paramedics said your quick thinking saved them." Maria shook her head gently. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone. Most people would have stayed angry. Most people wouldn't have come back after being pushed away." She lowered her gaze. "I couldn't ignore the feeling." He took a deep breath. "Maria, you've done more for my children than I have." She looked up startled. "Sir, don't say that." "It's true," he forced out. "I'm always working, always away. I thought money, comfort, and security were enough to raise them, but you showed me what I failed to see." He paced slowly, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You gave them love, care, presence, all the things I should have given them, and when I made the worst mistake of my life, you still came back." Maria's eyes softened with empathy, though she said nothing. She knew the weight of regret too well. Before Alexander could speak again, his phone rang. Both of them froze. He answered with trembling hands. "Yes, this is Alexander Knight." Silence, then a breath of relief. Thank you so much," he whispered. He lowered the phone and turned to Maria, his eyes shining with emotion. "They're stable, they'll be fine. They're asking for you." Maria cupped her hands over her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. Alexander stepped closer. "Maria, come with me to the hospital." She blinked, unsure if he truly meant it. She wasn't family. She wasn't important in the eyes of the world. But she was important to the children. He read her hesitation and said softly, "You belong with them, and they want you there." Maria nodded faintly. The drive to the hospital was quiet but peaceful, with the morning breeze blowing softly through the half-open windows. When they arrived, Emma and Liam were lying in their beds, hooked to monitors but smiling weakly. "Maria," Emma cried. Liam, with his small voice, whispered, "I knew you'd come." Maria rushed to their bedside, hugging them gently. The children clung to her as if she were their lifeline. And then something unexpected happened. Alexander stepped forward, his voice full of emotion. "Children, I want to say something." Emma and Liam looked up, curious. "Maria didn't just save your lives," he said softly. "She saved mine too. She showed me what really matters." Maria looked at him, stunned. He continued. From today, she is not just your maid. She is part of this family. Maria's heart stopped. Emma gasped happily, so she stays forever. Alexander smiled gently, if she wants to. Maria's eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. I would love to stay. The children wrapped their tiny arms around her again, and Maria felt something she hadn't felt in years, belonging. Alexander watched the scene with a warmth in his chest he didn't recognize. For the first time, he saw a future where his home wasn't defined by money or loneliness, but by love. Later, as they prepared to leave the hospital, Alexander walked beside Maria quietly. You gave me a second chance, he said, his voice sincere, at being a father, at being a better man. She looked at him shyly. Everyone deserves a second chance. He nodded, so do you. Maria blinked, confused. Me? Yes, he said gently. A second chance at life, at dreams, at whatever you want. You gave my children something priceless. Let me give you something too, safety, respect, and a home. Not because you work for me, but because you matter. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't alone. The Knight family walked out of the hospital together. Alexander, Emma, Liam, and Maria, side by side. The morning sun washed over them, warm and hopeful. And in that brightness, something new was born. A family, built not from wealth, but from love, forgiveness, and a second chance that brought them all back to life. 3 days passed after the terrifying night that had almost stolen Emma and Liam from the world. The hospital stay had been short, but the emotional impact lingered like a quiet storm beneath the surface. Back at the mansion, everything felt different, softer, warmer, quieter. It was as if the house itself had taken a deep breath after years of holding it in. Maria tried to return to her normal duties, but nothing felt normal anymore. She wasn't just the maid sweeping floors and folding clothes. The children followed her everywhere, holding her hand, telling her stories, asking her to sit with them during meals. Even Alexander spoke to her differently now. But beneath the new warmth, something else stirred questions. Questions Maria had buried for years, and questions Alexander finally felt brave enough to face. One evening after the children fell asleep, Alexander called Maria to his office. She walked in nervously, her heartbeat echoing in her chest. The last time she had stood in this room, he had fired her, cruelly, coldly, without listening. But tonight the atmosphere was different. A small warm lamp glowed in the corner. Documents were pushed aside, leaving the table clear. And for the first time ever, Alexander was not standing behind his desk like a king on a throne. He was sitting in the chair across from her, waiting. Maria, he began softly, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said long ago. She folded her hands in her lap, unsure where he was going. I wasn't angry at you that night, he admitted. I was angry at myself. Maria blinked in surprise. Alexander exhaled deeply, his gaze distant. The truth is, I've been failing my children. I've been failing as a father. He looked at her again, his eyes tired. Work became my excuse, my shield. I thought if I provided them with everything money could buy, I was doing enough. Maria's voice was gentle. You were doing your best, sir. He shook his head. No, I was, but you saw them. You truly saw them. You knew their fears, their favorites, their moods, everything. You became the mother figure they never had. The words hung between them. Maria swallowed hard. I only tried to love them. And that, Alexander whispered, is more than I ever managed. The silence afterwards wasn't heavy. It was healing. Then slowly Maria spoke. I know what it feels like to lose someone. That's why I couldn't leave them that night. Alexander looked at her with concern. Maria, what happened? She hesitated, her breath shook. She had never told anyone in the Knight mansion the truth. Not the children, not the staff, not even herself fully. My son, she whispered. Alexander froze. I had a son, Maria continued. A little boy, he was 6. He had a weak heart and one night he didn't wake up. Alexander's face softened with deep sympathy. Maria. Tears spilled down her cheeks silently. I wasn't there. I had gone to my night shift at the cleaning job. I left him alone with a neighbor for those few hours, and I wasn't there when he took his last breath. Alexander felt a pang in his chest, a sharp, raw ache that swallowed him whole. That's why I felt something was wrong with Emma and Liam, she whispered. I felt the same heaviness in my chest, the same fear. I couldn't ignore it again. I couldn't lose another child even if they weren't mine. Her voice broke. Alexander moved without thinking. He stood from his chair and gently placed his hand over hers. Maria, he said softly, you didn't fail your son. Life failed you, but you saved my children because your love is stronger than your pain. Her shoulders trembled. And he continued, we need that love here more than ever. Maria looked up, surprised. Why are you telling me all this? Because, Alexander said, you deserve to know the truth, and because I want this home to be your home too, not as an employee, not out of duty, but because you have healed this family in ways I never could. Maria's lips trembled. You mean you want me to stay? Yes, he said firmly, but not as a maid anymore. Her eyes widened. Then what would I be? Alexander smiled gently, a rare smile that softened every hard line on his face. Whatever you choose to be, but for Emma and Liam, you already are family. Maria's breath caught. Her heart felt full and fragile at the same time. For years she had carried grief like a heavy stone in her chest, but now she felt something new. Hope. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the breakfast room. The table was set simply, no fancy silverware, no lavish breakfast spreads, just warm pancakes, fruit bowls, and a jug of orange juice. The children sat eagerly, whispering to each other and glancing toward the doorway. Maria walked in slowly, still unsure how she fit into this new chapter. But the moment the children saw her, their eyes lit up. Maria, sit next to us, Emma called. Yeah, sit here. Liam pointed to the chair between them. Alexander watched quietly from the head of the table, and for once, he wasn't thinking about meetings or deadlines. He was simply observing, taking in the sight of his children smiling, laughing, feeling safe. Maria sat, and the children instantly leaned against her, chattering about cartoons, pancakes, their favorite colors. For the first time, the room felt alive, full of warmth, like a family home rather than a billionaire's cold mansion. After breakfast, Alexander cleared his throat. I have an announcement. Emma and Liam straightened excitedly. Maria tensed, unsure what was coming. I've made some changes, Alexander said. From today, Maria is no longer the maid. Maria's heart jumped into her throat. She has a new role, he continued. She will stay here with us as part of the family, as someone who cares for you, as someone important. Emma clapped instantly. Liam cheered. Maria blinked through tears. Sir, I don't know what to say. Alexander stepped closer. You don't have to say anything, he replied. You've given this family more than I ever could. Now let me give you a place where you belong. She looked away for a moment, overwhelmed, her chest tight with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. I've never belonged anywhere, she whispered. You belong here, he said softly, with us. The children hugged her again, their little arms warm and eager. Maria closed her eyes, letting the moment sink into her bones like sunlight reaching a place long frozen. Days passed. The mansion transformed, not through renovations or money, but through something far greater, love. Maria helped the children with their homework, cooked meals with them, taught them songs from her childhood. Emma began sleeping peacefully again, no longer waking from nightmares. Liam started talking more, becoming braver, more playful. And Alexander changed too. He came home earlier. He learned to sit with the kids and listen, truly listen. He asked Maria for advice. He stood in the kitchen helping slice vegetables, awkward and slow, but trying. One evening, as all four of them sat on the patio watching the sun fade behind the gardens, Emma whispered, "This is the happiest we've ever been." Alexander looked at his children, then at Maria. "Me too," he admitted quietly. Maria's eyes softened. "You've done so much for them." Alexander shook his head. "No, we have. I couldn't do it without you." She blushed lightly, looking down. "I'm just doing my best." "And your best," he said gently, "has saved us all." The breeze blew softly, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden. The sky glowed with pink and orange streaks. The moment felt like a beginning. A new chapter. A new family. Later that night, as Maria tucked the children into bed, Emma grabbed her hand. "Can we call you Mama someday?" she whispered shyly. Maria froze. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "You can call me whatever you want," Maria whispered, kissing her forehead. In the doorway, Alexander stood quietly, watching the scene with a heart full of emotions he had never allowed himself to feel. When Maria finally stepped out, he said softly, "You gave them back their childhood." Maria looked up, tears shining, "And they gave me back my heart." He reached out gently, not touching her, but offering something unspoken. A future. A chance. A family reborn from pain, saved by love, held together by a woman who once believed she had nothing left to give. But she did. And she always would.